Department of Education under the Biden administration has introduced a new rule that redefines the term sex under the Title IX to include gender identity and sex stereotypes. This policy implies that individuals who speak out against gender identity, fail to recognize preferred pronouns, express concerns for their physical safety, or exercise their right not to undress in front of possible biological sex could be penalized for harassment. This rule not only contradicts common values held by most of our local community, but was also implemented without proper legal procedure. According to the Administrative Procedure Act, any changes to rules or laws must be passed by Congress. Recent lawsuits argue that the Biden administration's rule violates the Administrative Procedure Act and the principle of separation of powers as the Department of Education altered Title IX without congressional approval. Furthermore, this rule infringes on students' First Amendment rights by compelling them to affirm others' genders and identities and discriminate against opposing views. It also violates other constitutional provisions, including the Spending Clause, the First and the 10th Amendments. In Wisconsin, state law does not redefine sex to include gender identity. Currently, 26 states have issued injunctions against this rule. One such injunction issued by a federal court judge in Kansas blocks the regulation in 4 states and applies to the school attended by members of Moms for Liberty, Young Americans Foundation, and Female Athletes United. This significantly expands the geographic scope of Title IX issue, affecting schools in the other 24 states not covered by the statewide federal injunctions. Based on my research, current regulations indicate that schools with students whose parents are non-members of Moms for Liberty are exempt from the Department of Education's enforcement of the Title IX policy. To date, and this is within about a week ago, to date, no school has been legally required to comply with this policy. Therefore, my question to the board is, if no legal papers have been served, the University of Wisconsin states that they are not implementing Title IX. 26 states have issued injunctions. We have a letter from Scarlett Johnson confirming that Wrightstown School District is on Moms for Literacy. And last but not least, the updated list, 100% showing we are on Moms for Liberty. Why are we pushing to adopt the policy? So many are opposing. Is it because it's a law or simply because it's recommended? Many recommendations turn out to be poor decisions. We are not obligated to follow through them, especially in a situation like this. In my personal opinion, I strongly urge everyone on this board to thoroughly investigate this matter as I have. I mean, I can't tell you how many nights I spent up to 11, 12 o'clock just trying to find stuff. Consider what is truly at stake for our students and community. Conduct your research with an open mind. Ask the questions, and ultimately, I believe you will see that this is not appropriate to pass 2264.
So, I have a point of reference. Andy, I didn't catch what you said about what Bob Butler had said. It covers us for something, but doesn't cover us for what else? So if we're on the list.
You're on the list. It just, they can't, all that the injunction is it stops the Department of Education from taking any federal funds or actions against the school district for federal dollars. So while this plays out in the court system, if you don't pass this and you're on this list, they're not going to take your funds away from you. They can't. And Bob Butler told you guys that a month ago. He told you that. So he was virtually here. So he also did tell you, in Wisconsin, you are governed under the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, not the 10th Circuit, the 7th Circuit. In Wisconsin right now, it is law in our state. Now, school districts, some chose not to follow it. And if you choose not to do it, then that's fine. We'll have to utilize the 2020 regulations. But you do, and Bob and Dan Miller were both not adamant, but they said, you need to understand and make your board understand too, that you make this decision, you still can get sued from somebody on the other side that feels they're not being covered because you're not covering the federal policy, the law. So they said you could get possibly somebody there from the other side that wants to sue you, that may be a staff member or a parent of a student, that are for this policy. Now, it's probably unlikely on either side of this are we going to see a lawsuit, but you also have to remember, I'm giving you all the information. You guys as a board make your decision from that. But you also have to understand your liability insurance coverage, what CIC said. They will settle the claim if there's a claim against us. If you don't like how it's settled as a board, then you're on your own. Okay? So that's the information I have, and that's what I sent to you, and you guys are able to read.
Thank you, Andy. I know there's a bully policy, but can you hand me a laptop there? And I know when I read it, it's covered thoroughly about protecting our district. That includes a lot of what is in this Title IX, but I don't know the policy number offhand, but it's anti-bully policy from
Anti-harassment or something?
yeah, something like anti-harassment,
Yeah,
anti-bullying, yeah, and it talks about everything in detail about gender ideology, sex, male and female. A lot of the things that I think everybody was worried about on the board, or a majority of may have been worried. If we already have a policy on there that would protect our district, I just wanna read it, and I apologize, I don't have it with me. So I think I left it at home.
Is it 5517?
Okay, student anti-harassment is one of them, that is policy 5517. That is it right there. Okay, I have a copy right here, I just thought okay, so this policy is 10 pages long, and it talks about prohibited harassment, violations, and anti-harassment policy. It talks about the definitions, third parties, sexual harassment, harassment in general. And then it also talks about retaliation, that was part of Title IX, race, color, religious, national origin, harassment, disability harassment, reports and complaints, harassing conduct, filing a complaint, so we have that process in there in case there is a complaint investigation procedure, and as well as additional school district action with state statutes as long, and privacy and confidentiality as well. Remedial action and monitoring, sanctions and disciplinary actions, education and training for the staff, retention, records and materials. So I mean, it clearly states in here, and after I read this, I felt that we are protected with what we have already.
Well, this policy doesn't protect you, you already have the 2020 Title IX
Exactly.
policy.
But I think with the
So-
concerns that some of the folks had are in this policy right here. Like, what if somebody were to be harassed, or, you know, it literally spells, I mean, let me just
Well,
get that,
but if you, once you get that policy up, if you read sexual harassment, for purposes of this policy only, and I'm reading from 5117, and not sexual harassment under Title IX Adjusting Policy 2266. Okay? So this policy is not covering the sexual harassment under Title IX. That's what you have 2266, which you guys approved, the board approved.
yeah, and so this is in addition to that, Andy, is what I'm
Right.
saying, yeah, you're right. So
Yeah.
this is in addition to that. But it has examples in here, like there's 22 examples of behavior in which if students were to do, there would be an investigation. If you look on, there's no page number, but I'm gonna say it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 and 5 have examples.
Towards the end of the policy?
In the middle, yeah, in the middle. So this is like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Are you,
10, 11, 12. There's 13-page policy, and it's page 4 and 5 that would have examples of what constitutes harassment or, you know, discrimination or sexual harassment.
yeah, under sexual harassment, they have the letters A through
Yeah.
J.
But I thought I saw gender ideology in here, and I know I did, I just
You
didn't
might
highlight.
have.
Yeah, sex stereotyping, that would be it, but I see privacy, walking into the student bathroom, locker room, asking about, you know, specific clothing and previous sexual experiences, that's number 10. Let's see what else. Sexual innuendos. Giving gifts or money to students that are non-educational. I think you guys can read it, but I'm just looking to see where I had crossed that. Okay, so remarks speculating about a person's sexual activities or sexual history, remarks about one's sexual activities or sexual history, a pattern of conduct, which is subtle in nature, that has sexual overtones and is intended to create or has the effect of creating discomfort or humiliation to another, and verbal, nonverbal, physical aggression, intimidation, hostility based on sex stereotyping that does not involve conduct of sexual nature.
So do you feel that, what you're saying is you feel,
I feel comfortable that we have been protected all along, and that we also saw these policies that were in the Spirit paper last week. If anyone read the paper, we referenced these policies in there. So I feel the district is covered with 22.
66?
Yes, thank you. And then with this anti-harassment policy, I think we're definitely covered. And we do have the complaint investigation procedure as well, which is Carolyn. So I'm saying that I'm comfortable with what the district has done so far to be protected.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have the 2020 policy on Title IX.
Right.
Yeah, all this is an update to that. So, if you're comfortable with that, then anybody else have anything?
Jeff?
So, yeah, I read the posting in the newspaper, that was very good, I felt that we were covered as well from that. But there's a couple of things here. For policy 2266, we already made the alteration on that policy. We're gonna have to go back and change the dates. So there's one policy that needs to be reviewed pronto. If it says a prior to, complaints prior to a date, go to this, and after, so we need to change that one back. The other thing is, you said,
Hold on, just help me understand, why do we have to change it?
because it has a prior to date in there, like, anything that happens before this date, apply to policy 2266, anything after this date. So we need to make sure that that's changed, that's the first thing. The second thing is, and I know we've talked this ad nauseum, but the ruling for, and I want clarity on this, the ruling, Andy, you said it's state law already, that all this stuff is in here. Can you explain
No,
to the,
What is state law?
you said that,
This is federal.
right, but our policy, let me go back to my notes right here. That in Wisconsin, that this is already state law, and I think what you were referring to is the bathroom use by transgender students, is that correct?
Yes.
Whitaker.
The Whitaker case in Kenosha, and then there's one in Indiana. I do not, Bob Putler mentioned that case in Indiana to you guys. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
Okay, so what does the Whitaker case say that, I mean, because the Whitaker, so this is case law, so there's a statute, and the court ruled that this is what they believe the statute is. So, can you explain to the board what Whitaker is about?
Whitaker already talked about bathroom use, that potentially it's, if someone were to come and go through a process of transgender, that they could go in a bathroom that they identify with. You have safeguards here. You have a gender identity plan that needs to be followed through here in this district. So parents, counselors, administrators, the student, and probably their medical provider would have to come in and sit down and go over a plan and come up with the administration come up with an agreeable plan for a student if they were considering doing this. We do not have any student currently in Wrightstown even contemplating this plan. Am I off on that, administrators?
That's correct.
So then what does it mean for current policy or current law based off of Whitaker for locker rooms and for sports teams and all that other stuff?
Currently, right now, they don't allow it, WIA. So we followed WIA.
So they don't allow, WIA doesn't WIA allow boys and girls sports right now, right? Or do they not?
I don't think, I wish Craig was here, I don't believe they do.
Well, what?
Yes, at least the girls.
The plan, the team, or,
So they do not.
Unless they're co-ed teams.
Right,
unless they're co-ed.
because in some school districts across the state, they don't have the luxury of having two wrestling teams, so the girls wrestle on the boys' teams. The same thing in golf. Some golf teams in the state have a boys and girls team because they don't have enough girls to have a full team, so the girls have to compete on the boys' team. That's been for 20-some years, as far as all 30 years that I've been in school.
And then as far as the locker rooms go, does the same Whitaker case apply to the bathrooms? Or is it not?
WIA right now, they don't go in.
I'm talking about the school, like, the way our policies are set up right now, the way that Whitaker ruling is, do we allow, if you have the gender plan, like you're talking about, will we allow boys, biological boys in female locker rooms?
Going through the plan, they would have to pass a certain amount of time, and correct me if I'm wrong.
The answer to that is no,
Yeah.
because you cannot assure privacy when you do.
Okay, there we go.
So I did find, the statement I was looking for, it's on the first page, third paragraph, it says, "The board will vigorously enforce its prohibition against harassment based on the traits of sex, including gender status, change of sex, or gender identity." And if you continue to read it, it says it's protected by federal and state civil rights laws, protected classes,
Which policy are you talking about?
the 5517, student anti-harassment, as well as 551701 on bullying.
But it also states in there that bullying that rises to the level of sexual harassment is covered by policy 2266.
Correct, so that's what we're talking about, right, yep.
And further up, it states,
So basically what that means is that we are covered by 5517, 551701, and 2266. So I see no reason to, make a motion on 2264 unless the board wants to, I'll ask for one.
I think we should.
So you're saying, I gotta make sure I'm getting this straight here. So you're saying not to adopt the new Title IX policy because we're covered?
Yes, Tiffany, we're covered.
By
We are covered
opinion.
by a current policy as well as 5517 and 551701, which was also stated in the paper last week, along with a couple other policies. I don't remember them off the top of my head. So the district has done a good job protecting students up to this point. There's no reason to adopt 2264. And we're on
Well,
the list.
I think what most of the board is concerned about is the bathroom issue. Right?
Well, I'm not sure, but we
Because now with them just saying,
they have a gender identity plan where the parents and the children have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
but they wouldn't allow it anyways, what Scott just said. You know, like locker rooms, bathrooms as well, or just locker rooms?
Bathrooms, if you have an approved gender support plan, that is an option, yes.
For them to do
sex to your gender identity.
Mhm.
So it would basically redefine how we've defined male and female for the past billion years here. And it would say that they could select whichever bathroom, locker room, sport. It opens up that door. That's what this new policy would do.
The other thing with this new policy that I've discovered is in the court system, it actually gives the accuser more civil rights than it does the accused. Whereas they say if a transgender student said, you know, they didn't use my pronouns, or they didn't call me he, them, or I feel like I've been harassed in this way, it gives more rights to that person than it does to the person that was being accused. Okay, and that's the way the court system is with 2264. If you dig really, really deep into it, and it takes a lot to find it. I mean, I can't tell you how many nights I spent looking at this, and reading articles, and just going through it. And it really, really pushes towards the accuser versus the accused, and gives that level up. Whereas if we don't adopt 2264, it keeps the field a lot more level for the accused than the accuser, whatever way it works, okay? There's a fine balancing line there in this whole deal, and I would rather have a fair play than I would give him a power of one over the other. And that's just in the research I've done.
Bob from Wasby actually mentioned that. He said,
Yeah.
when you look at the differences between the two laws, 2264, it tilts the scale a little bit more to the complainant. And with 2266, it's more level playing field, because 2264 introduces subjectivity, and subjectivity is your feelings. You know, your belief, may not be based on fact, it's, so, and it also introduces a term called preponderance, and preponderance sounds fancy, but it essentially means that the majority can be 51% accurate, so, and that's another, just to dovetail on what you were saying.
Thank you.
And personally speaking, I reached out to about 24 people, and I just asked them, what are your feelings about this new law? And essentially touched on, essentially it's going to redefine what sex means to include gender identity and sexual orientation. And the vast majority of the responses were quite strong. And they were not in any way, shape, or form in agreement with the new law's definition of what sex is. And so, as somebody who's an elected official from the board, I know I need to talk to my constituents and get a thumb pulse on what their feelings are.
But that's where I'm struggling, because I totally understand community, and some are gonna be for it, some are gonna be against it, I get it. I struggle with the fact that we're on this board to support the kids in this school, all of them. So even if I myself don't agree with this, I feel if I say no to it, I'm letting those kids down. I feel like if I go the other way, I am really struggling with this.
No, I see what you're saying, Tiffany. I think that's how we were at first. What I'm saying is based off the policies that the district has already, it is protecting those kids. It says right here, against change of sex, gender identity, gender status. I mean, it's spelled out in 5517. And it follows the similar process to, as far as, criminal investigation, retaliation, all of that stuff. What I found to be different in the new one is that you have another layer, I think a deputy and a coordinator, but we already have two people right now. Carolyn is one of them, and then Dan's the other, all right? So we already have two resources.
So then why
are we having a new one? Why is
right?
That's what we've been trying to say the last couple of weeks, is why do we have
Nothing, I don't remember any of this coming up with the other policies that were coming
and I agree, I read it in the paper, and that's when I did research. And so that's how, I think it would have been nice to have this, you know, these policies that we already have, this 5517, I mean, we did have it, but to be brought up, I mean, there's so many policies to try to remember. I think once I read this, after it was published in the paper, then I felt more at ease. Because I abstained my first vote because I was not clear, like how you were thinking, or, you know, how you're questioning, I was thinking the same way as you were. So I abstained because I was not clear, and I had some concerns, some personal beliefs as well, right? But mostly it was just trying to understand the big picture, the information, and whether we're covered and why we would go this route. Go ahead. Sorry.
So the other thing I wanted that I did find out of this that I didn't put in my speech that I just said, the amount of extra administrative training that would be due with signing on to 2264 would be far greater than what the two that we have now. It would go all the way down to teachers, down to paras, down to, you can go down to your janitors, and then some of the aspect could go into older students. So we would be facing a major retrain, and with a major retrain, we would be spending extra money for somebody to come in here and do those extra trainings.
Yeah.
So it's huge there. It's-
We've been trained already, Mike.
Okay, but I'm just saying, as far as the research I did, you know, yes, administration has and some teachers have, but it can go farther than that, into your all the way to the staff, including janitors, et cetera. It can go that far down the line.
I've already done that.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
did.
All right, well,
Wausau
Because it's required.
supplied us the video.
okay.
The
And I
school
wasn't
district.
aware of that, but I just wanted to touch base, that's the research that I had done and I had found out, with that it really steps up a level of the amount of people that have to be involved in this policy within our school.
And we were trained with some of the administration at CISA 7.
Okay.
So that's our local education association, and they put it on for us and trained us, and then our full staff was trained, so all of them had to go through it and watch the video that Fossey put out for us.
Mhm.
So that's what we did in service 2 weeks ago. So we trained there. You guys can decide in policy if, all I'm trying to do for you guys is tell you where there could be problems for you. And if you're all right with the risk, then that's what we talked about. If you're okay taking the risk with it, then take the shot at it and not pass it.
Does everyone fully understand what the risk is though?
Why don't you explain it? What's the risk?
Yeah, what's the risk? What do you feel the risk is, Frank?
I feel that we're opening up liability to somebody that is gender identifying for a lawsuit against the district. That's what I feel it is.
So currently, we don't have any students, we just stated, but I feel that if there is an issue, we're gonna fall back on those policies that Angela had covered with.
Right, I mean, this is a
55.
thorough
You're gonna fall
investigation.
back on 2260.
Oh, like 2260, fall back on those other ones.
Yeah, there is no.
You know,
You're gonna have to, that's what Bob Butler even told you, you're gonna have to use your old Title IX policy, and that's what you're gonna have to live on. It doesn't mean that you possibly, the person can still sue you. Just because you have the old policy, they can go after you.
Right.
Somebody on the right side of this could go after you and sue you. My job to you guys is risk aversion. I don't want us to be sued by anybody. I don't want us to pay any money in
But
any court case.
anybody can sue anybody,
Right,
but you may not win. That's
Right.
the difference here, right?
But nobody wins for us. I don't want us to expend money on any type of lawsuit.
We have to have standing, you know, so
Yeah.
I can sue you. 'cause
Exactly.
we're Sure.
But
But
you
you
gotta
have
have
standing, yeah,
Right.
by standing, you know, you could say, so someone could say, school board, you are not following the current federal law. And someone might agree and say, you have standing, so then we'll go to case and you have cost, right?
Well, see, that's where I'm confused, because when I read this policy, I don't know how we're not following the new one, because when I look, this is a very thorough, it's 13 pages, it says exactly what we would do if we would be we'd have a lawsuit against us, an investigation, we have retaliation in here, that was part of that new policy. So So I guess that's why I'm struggling, is that we already have everything here to protect us. Why would we wanna go say yes to something that we're still, as a board, not sure of? And then we're on a list, you know what I mean? So, those are just my thoughts,
Yep.
but go ahead, yep,
The
it's good
first-
discussion.
The first lawsuits are dropped, and it was, Racine Unified is being sued by parents, who are suing because this is not the policy in their school, 2266. So that was dropped a couple, well, maybe a week and a half ago, so like Andy said, it works in both ways, right? So if your school is covered, you run the risk of, hey, why don't we just change policy if we're covered under this law? Now, who knows what's gonna happen with that case? The lawsuit doesn't mean anything until it's adjudicated and ruled on, and it goes through several years of.
Lawsuits don't happen overnight. They drag
Yeah,
out in
it
court
goes
for a
on
long
forever.
time.
So, that's something to be very aware of.
It could be 2 years before you can go to court.
Right, and they're usually settled before, so.
Yep. So the other thing too is I had, in my research, read a letter by Scarlett Johnson, that if we adopt 2264, and we are part of Moms for Liberty themselves can actually come after us, because we are going against what their policies are and what our parents are signing up for. So they could actually come back at us for being adamant for adopting the policy if they really wanted to. And I'd be willing to try and find that article, get and send it over to you guys if you'd like. You can try and find it when I get home tonight, but it was a very good article about what possibilities are if we do adopt this policy. So,
Based on Bob Butler, though, he confirmed that whether or not we choose to or don't choose to, it's our liability, not.
You're covered with liability insurance, right?
We're
They would
covered.
cover us, but CIC, that's your carrier, is not going to cover a protracted lawsuit. They're only going to settle the lawsuit in the quickest means possible. That's what they sent us, and I shared that with you guys. As a board, I sent that letter to you guys. So what they're saying there, and what Bob said, is that they're going to settle that lawsuit however they can, the quickest terms, whether that's paying a payment to the people or whatever. If you as a board and your school district chooses to fight on, then that's on your own money. So they wouldn't cover us after that. They're gonna try to settle it as quick as possible, because they're not gonna go into a protracted case of this.
Andy, what was the law that you were, so I shouldn't say the law, it was similar to the Good Samaritan Act for board members, where if you're trying to do due diligence, you said there was a coverage for that.
Oh, I talked to the lawyers, you're not covered, there's no immunity for board members. You're required to follow the law and do the legal duty of the board. Dan Malin talked about that. There is a section 1983 in the federal thing, but that's more constitutionally covered, he said.
Okay.
But he said it's your duty to follow the law. Now,
Okay.
it doesn't mean you're going to get personally sued. You guys gotta understand that when Bob and Dan talk about fact patterns and things that can happen, they talk possibilities, because they're lawyers. They're going to tell you every possibility there is, right? Because they want you to make the best decision you can make. But yeah, you don't have immunity.
Yes,
So
I just thought there was a-
potentially if somebody decided to do that, they could come after you individually. No, it hasn't happened. Do I think it's gonna happen? Probably not.
Right.
But potential, that's what they said.
I just thought there was something in that, in the context of right around the Good Samaritan law as a board member, similar to what the Good Samaritan law would be, for doing your due diligence. I just thought there's a point there that you had made, and I guess I'll do a little more research on that, on my own time, just to, see what I can find with it. So, but thank you for
Yeah,
that.
but I don't know what the.
I'm trying to think of the actual phrase that you would use for it, but it's not coming to me.
Indemnification,
Huh?
being an indemnification,
Are we
Possibly, yeah.
identified?
yeah,
I think that's what you're asking.
yeah, you're not, if that's what you're asking, you're not totally, if you don't have immunity from this.
But for
That's
any
according you're not following the legal law or doing your legal due diligence responsibility of a board, potential is there. It's only a potential,
Yeah, right.
don't think you're gonna get sued. Jeff's shaking his head up and down, it's
agree.
not.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So there are a lot of other schools on, I saw Pecan and West Peter, Pulaski, were there a lot of other ones that did or no?
I don't know how many were on in the beginning, I think there are quite a few that have signed on, or that have been put on the list, I don't know. You guys got that last list from the 28th,
Mhm.
right?
There's hundreds.
I don't know how many there are in Wisconsin.
I was just thinking locally.
Oh,
I don't think it's on the side of 2260.
Like Peshtigo and
No,
Marinette.
they're on the.
Yeah, Peshtigo and Marinette, I see on the list. Was West Lapeer on it?
Pecan,
Pecan, Pulaski, O'Connell, Falls, was it? I'm just trying to think of ones that I saw that I skipped right down basically to W,
Mhm.
when they told me about it, so. And Pulaski's been good, they've been sharing, Bob, and Dan both called Tuesday and said that we made the list finally. So, before that, we had not been on there.
Yeah, Jeff?
So just for reference, it's by school, so let's say our high school was covered, but the other two weren't covered, then what is the school district gonna do, right? So in our case, all three schools were covered, and we're on that list, so, all of them are.
So I would still like to request, make a motion, or have somebody make a motion, but is there any other questions or discussions before we do that? Okay, so do I have a motion to approve policy 2264, Title IX, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education program and activities? No motion? Okay. All right, help me with this. Anybody opposed?
No.
How do I do
There's no
this?
motion, no motion.
Okay,
So
all right,
it's just being tabled.
it's tabled, okay.
Hearing done, motion's tabled.
All right, hearing's done, motion's tabled. All right, thank you. Again, first time we had that. All right, thank you. That was really good discussion, by the way, so thank you for everybody that done research and came prepared. The next item on the agenda is part-time staff snow days, a discussion regarding paid snow days for the part-time staff. So,
I have a question
Yes.
about 2266, do we, and this is my ignorance, do we make a motion now that undo the changes of 2266 that we made a month ago?
No, I'm gonna talk to Bob about that. I'm not doing anything to it.
Has to be agendized.
Yeah.
yeah,
Next agenda.
yeah.
I don't know if we have to do anything to it, so we'll talk, yes, it is an effectual decision.
Okay, so part-time snow days, Andy or Mike, you wanted to make any comments on this?
I will start with this one.
Or? Okay,
No, Michael, no. Mike, you need to accuse yourself from this discussion. You
Okay.
can't be discussing it because it's.
okay, wait, 1 second, wait. Can he can be part of the discussion, we had Tiffany be part of the discussion, I thought he couldn't just vote on it.
He cannot vote, he should recuse himself out of this even discussion on it. Because we're talking money,
Okay,
Okay, so,
and that's what, I don't know what he's listening to.
I said I'd listen to Amy.
It is,
it's, I guess my only thing here on this is that I'm not speaking on behalf of somebody in my family. I'm wanted to speak on behalf of all the people that have reached out to me. Because I'll recuse myself and
Okay.
we'll,
the best thing you should do with that.
I'm gonna leave it at that and we will follow suit later on.
okay, so hold on 1 second. So can he speak on behalf of others and just not?
No, because it's your wife is an employee here. So when we talk about money or anything, it benefits and money from that, he's gonna have to stay out of that discussion.
Okay,
Wasby informed me, he said, Mike needs to recuse himself out of this discussion. So,
out of the discussion.
and vote, he can't vote on it.
We have a conflict of interest policy, can we pull it up and look at it just to be sure?
I don't even know what it is, the number, I didn't go back bylaws, 01, what did you say?
0144.3.
144. Where did you see it? Oh, there it is. All right. If you look at it, it says board members shall perform their duties in an ethical manner free from conflict of interest pursuant to 19.59 Wisconsin State Statutes. And this is what Bob and Dan talked about. No board member under A shall use their position as a board member to obtain financial gain or anything of substantial value for themselves, immediate family as defined in 19.427 Wisconsin statutes, or any organization which the board member is associated with. Okay? Do we need to go any further on that
No,
number?
it's fine, I'll
Okay.
leave it at that.
All right.
So,
G says
um,
participation in both the discussion of the matter and the vote thereon.
oh, thank you.
Don't abstain.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tiffany, that's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted that just because we're new, and so I think that'll help us, when we do these things. So thank you, Mike, for recusing and allowing us to research that.
Okay.
So who can speak to this then?
Do you step out, or can I listen?
You can listen.
You guys listen.
I'll take this, I'll take
Okay.
the topic.
All right.
So, from what I understand, part-time staff would like to have, their days covered, like teachers, for staff, snow days, is that correct?
I think that's what, to get paid on the snow days, which we have built-in time of 3.2 days,
Okay.
all right, in the school district, because we need to get 1,137 hours of instruction in to receive state aids, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you have built in our calendar 3.2 days of inclement weather, ice, emergency or something, all right? The problem becomes this, and we talked about this. We budget, all of our money is budgeted, right?
Mhm.
So people's wages are budgeted and their days are budgeted for. If we pay for snow days of hourly staff and pay them for those days, and we go over 3.2 snow days in a year, we're going to be paying them above our budget costs if we have to add time at the end of the school year. You see what we're saying? So if we have to go past, say we get 5 days this year, snow, it's not going to go, that would be 1.8 days,
Okay.
okay? If we pay them for snow days in January, that's been budgeted for, our money's been expended out of this budget. Then when we have to add that time at the end of the year, we're going to be paying them above our budgeted money in the
Okay.
school district.
One
Okay, and
point.
it's just not the aides, you have janitors, our day attendants in each building, buildings and ground are hourly, and some of our administrative assistants are hourly. And food services hourly, thank you. And what was the other one?
Custodial.
Yep, custodial, the day attendants, so it's more than just a handful of people we're talking about.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's where it becomes an issue. Do some districts do it? Sure, there's some districts pay for one. Snow day, they'll pay them on the first one and not after that. So it's not that it hasn't been done. I think you gotta be careful because it becomes a slippery slope.
Mhm.
It's one that, I get why you want to do it, to help people out, I understand that, right? And yes, it's not their fault we have a snow day, right? But unfortunately, in any hourly position that you go to, not many get paid for snow days, unfortunately. That's where it plays out, so I'm fine, you guys can discuss it and talk about it, or ask questions.
Okay, Jeff, you have your hand up.
Yeah, how do we come up with this, how do we come up with 3.2 snow days? Is that for like when school starts late?
Because we figure the days and hours, we have 178 days in our calendar of face-to-face instruction with our kids. It's a spreadsheet with the DPI, then we calculate our minutes that were in a day, from the time the bell rings till the bell ends, minus one passing time, and then you calculate, it's usually like, I'm gonna say 405 or 410 minutes a day of instruction. You multiply that out and you get an outrageous number of minutes. Then you gotta divide that back out to get your hours of instruction. So we are over the 1,137 hours required for us to receive state aids by 3.2 days. That's why we have that flexibility if we have snow or weather or something happens. Now, if a pipe bursts, you can get dispensation from that sometimes from the GPI.
So let me ask this hypothetical question, Andy. Full-time staff, they're teachers that have degrees, right? And if we were to pay part-time staff, how would that impact the teachers? How would that make the full-time teachers feel if we paid? I mean, I don't know, I'm just trying to think, would there be animosity towards,
I don't think that would.
no, okay.
You guys jump in, I don't think that would play.
Okay, that's what I just want, yeah, go ahead.
So in reading, I looked at the policies and then I also looked at the handbook. And in several places it talks about regular full-time and regular part-time employees. Is there an irregular part-time employee or a non-regular part-time employee or?
Regular part-time and regular full-time?
Yeah, it says
Well,
regular
full-time would be
full-time and regular part-time employees.
Part-time employees are 29 hours or less, they don't get benefits, insurance. Full-time, regular employees, hourly, do get benefits if they work full-time, and most of ours are 260. Some run the school year. Most of our part-time employees just work the school year, okay?
I think that might refer to temporary employees.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna get at. Is there some category of part-time employees that are quote-unquote regular?
Yeah, we have,
Some out that
yeah,
come in.
is it 2 or 1.5 guys?
Two guys mowing.
Yeah, they come in mow in the summer, help us mow.
Yeah.
And then we do have,
Substitute teachers and.
yeah, but we do have, what was the other one?
Like IT in the summer.
Yeah, IT, thank you, that's what I was thinking, if we do hire a student IT person to help out. That was going on.
So what's the population of regular part-time employees? How many would you say that is? Is that 30? Is it 20?
Regular,
County part-time employees,
It comes out at times.
it'd be more than 30 to 50, 30 to 50 would you
food
say?
service,
Like, yeah, food, I have like them 4K pairs, special ed pairs, kindergarten pairs, library para, my administrative assistant, my health aide. And so I probably here have at least 15, 20.
Yeah,
And
I'd probably say even, yes, we must have probably 50.
yeah, that's probably.
And some of them do come in on a snow day. So like my administrative assistant, she does come in on a snow day. So she would then clock in and get paid. But if she clocks out, but if, when she leaves, she clocks out. She doesn't get paid the whole day. She comes in to make sure that no kid is accidentally dropped off. I mean, and I'm in on a snow day as well to watch those things. Our Bonnie, the daytime custodian, she's always working on those days as well.
If you paid these snow days, then what are you going to do with Chris, Matt, and Jason, who, and daytime custodians that are full-time, they have to come here and clear
That's
snow.
what, I guess that was my question, I didn't
Yeah.
clarify that, okay, I was
Yeah.
trying, I'm like, that came out wrong, my question.
That's what it would be, because we're paying them to remove snow, shovel snow, and all that, right? But if you're going to pay for snow days, then are we going to what? Pay them twice? We're gonna pay them a snow day and we're gonna pay them their time to shovel on that day and plow and get us ready, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to get ready for the next day, right? So we can have school. So, it's a hard thing. I get the emotion of it, but it's hard when you look at financially, you're talking, we're just not talking 5 or 6 people.
Is there anything they can use?
Are they, yeah,
They can
say-
use a sick day.
Okay.
Okay,
So they can use their sick time.
and how much sick time do they have?
Well, they get the equivalent of 8 half days.
Okay,
So if you're half-time, if you're full-time, you get 8 days,
okay,
okay? So
Okay.
then so if you had 3.2 snow days, they would have to use 3.2 of their sick days. So that would mean 4.8.
Typically, they only get 2 sick days. They only
Well,
get 2
because
sick days
it's,
in that contract.
but it's 3 halves, it's 6 halves actually,
Mhm,
3 full-time, but 6 halves.
mhm.
It's prorated.
Right.
We just had this conversation,
Yeah.
it's one
Yeah.
totally different
Because of
issue.
hours.
It's one totally different issue.
That's why the hours, it's.
Okay.
I was gonna ask exactly what Sarah mentioned, would the paid snow days be prorated for the part-time employees?
Yeah, because they work like a 3/4 hour shift if they're half time employed, or under 29 hours. Okay, the other ones, no, they get their pay.
Yeah, they're full-time,
Yeah.
they're full-time employees.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff?
So I have a point of reference, so Dan, if there's about 50 part-time people, let's just say the average is 18, it comes up to be about $7,200. Does that sound about right? So there's 50,
Or not, you mean not just part-time, there's
No.
full-time, part-time.
Yeah.
okay, so there's some full-time, how many full-time hourlies do we have?
We
How many
probably,
full-time hours?
No.
5 or 6.
Gotta run that, every administrative assistant.
So,
you're forgetting all the.
so there's a difference.
Oh, yeah.
There's food service, yeah, you probably
So
talk.
probably 10 or
It doesn't affect
20.
full-time people, is where I'm going with this. If you're here to plow, that's doing your job. If you're here to shovel, you're here to do your job. What I'm hearing, I'm a firm believer in continuity of care and having the same people here, and you've expressed this a lot in the past year, is that, you know, benefits are a pro to keep people in our district. And we have higher turnover than most districts with our paraprofessionals and teachers' aides, and we can't pay them the same amount as what other districts around us pay us. I think this would be a nice benefit for them, especially because the 3.2 days are already budgeted, right? So at the very least, you know, 1.5 snow days per semester, I think would be good. And then it's.
Well, what do we do if we go over?
Well, then I just say we just create the policy to be something like 1.5 days or 2 days per semester, either 3.6 or days, and then, because we budgeted this money, we have the money, correct, Dan?
Well, we budget based on their schedule and their time in front of the kids. So back to Angela's point on, you know, how one group might feel over the other is that, you know, you have your custodians or full-time people that are coming in to do work, you know, and, you know, some folks they don't have work to do if they're not in front of kids, right? So, you might have the haves and have-nots. So I gotta come in and shovel the walk and all that kind of stuff, or what have you. But, you know, this person, you know, is gonna get paid for not coming in. You know, so there might be some, you know, animosity if you will.
Or you might get a
Yeah.
request that says, if I have to come in, will I get more paid?
You might get that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you might get some of that.
I think that's what I was trying to refer to more than,
Mhm.
okay, Jeff?
But I mean, back to Jeff's
Yeah.
point is that, you know, I take their contracted schedule and how many days they're supposed to work,
Okay,
and I calculate that out to figure out what their budget is. So if it's going to be more than that, then we need to increase the budget for that.
So, for example, though, if it's like a Friday, snow day is on a Friday, right? The teachers are getting paid, and they're not showing up, right?
Well, the teachers are paid for,
Salary.
so they're on salary, they're paid to do a job for 189 days.
Correct.
You know, so
Yep.
if we have to make up a day in June, they're coming in and they're not going to get more money.
Correct, but there's that 3.2 day window, right?
Right.
So we're already, we're talking about, you know, like, is there gonna be any animosity or whatever? Well, now you're a part-time teacher, and let's say you have, if the snow day is on a Thursday, and if you wanna get paid, you have to take a sick day or a personal day or whatever it may be, to get paid, but now all of a sudden you can't take little Johnny or Susie to the doctor's appointment to get their glasses done next week, or you have to take that day off. And so, I believe that it's already budgeted, if we don't exceed the budget that we already have put
It's
out.
not budgeted for.
Well,
Because it, you know, if someone's gonna work 5 hours a day, 5 days a week for 36 weeks, that's, I do that math and figure out that's their budget, right? So then, you know, if we end up having more days, so if we pay them for those days and then we have more days, now it ends up being more than that. So it's gonna be, you know.
You'd have to budget extra.
You'd have to budget
2.2 days
Yeah,
for everybody.
yeah, I would have to budget, you know, extra for that, not saying that it can't be done, but
Right
the
now,
budget for this year is not that way.
so the way you're doing it right now is you're not factoring for the hourlies, the 3.2 days.
Correct.
Okay, so that is not being budgeted. Okay, so, I mean, I think this is something to look into. I think that, I know it's not getting raised, I know it's not, like some sort of health benefit, because these are teachers that are dedicated employees to our district. They work hard for our kids, and they don't get all the perks that the, teachers get, or the administrators get, or some of us get in our own, jobs, here, when we sit on the board. And I think, again, continuity of care, having a special needs child, I think is really important to have that consistency, and anything that we can do to keep and retain these part-time employees, I think it's
But
beneficial.
do we know that that's making a break-in? I mean, is that reason that somebody's leaving, because I don't feel like we know that our turnover's been that
It's
much
been
when
better,
we're talking
it's been
about.
better.
I didn't lose anybody this year.
Yeah, it's actually been better because we
No, I mean, yeah, for like, from last year to this year, like, I think
it's been better since we changed some of the pay.
Right.
Like,
So we've already,
yeah.
some changes have already been made. I think
Yeah.
this is another one. If we go into another lean year, I think this is a good benefit to add. It's just the same with the vision and the dental that you implemented, previously.
I would request that, you know, given that we have a balanced budget at the moment, and we struggled to get there this year, if you are going to make a change, I would request that you do that for the 25-26 school year.
Yeah,
That's just one caveat,
that's a good idea.
so that we can plan ahead for it.
The other
I think
thing,
before we need to have a full cost of what that would be,
I think that would be a good, I was just gonna say that.
what those 3.2 days cost.
Yeah, and then I would also like to have Melinda part of this discussion, since she's a teacher, and we can't hear from Mike, you know, because of conflict of interest. I would wanna know what she thinks, or go out there to find out what's being said, so that we don't have a conflict of interest, because obviously there's an issue with this, and I think we just need to look into it a little further, but I think having it for 25-26 school year, and then also knowing what that cost would be would be helpful.
Yeah, we can put some math to that, and
Okay,
then, you know, if you want to have further discussion on it, just so we can see that.
So what meeting do we wanna bring it up in?
well, I would say, when would you guys be able to prepare that, given that the school year's just started, it would be a timeline, your timeline?
I mean, the math won't take a ton of time, I
Okay.
just think, you know, if we're not going to look at it for next year, you know,
Yeah.
for 25-26, then maybe we have time.
Okay,
You know, I would say let's get through the annual meeting and the
Okay.
tax levy first, and
Okay.
then,
that's
you know,
what I'm.
maybe we bring it back around the salary and benefits
Okay.
timeline, when we look at, that piece, I think that could fit potentially, when we look at increases, that would be January, February timeframe.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Anyone else feel that would be good too?
That's great.
Because I know Melinda likes to be part of those discussions as well, so I say we table that to that time frame then.
Another quick question, can part-timers do, when we have snow days, can they do training from home? Is there training that they can do, or anything to help the teachers that they're supporting?
Most of the haze in the barn, so to speak, for the year as far as training. I mean, we try to take care of a lot of that stuff, like non-violent crisis intervention training, and, you know, I mean, there is,
Medical training.
yeah,
those kind of
a
things.
lot of that stuff is like in August, in service time.
And typically, how many of those part-time would be those that are coming from families that go to the district, that are working here specifically to be able to have the days and times off that their children are off?
I would say almost 100% of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There used to be an offering that, staff, special ed staff could do this para-educator online and they could pay for people to do it. So that was an offering we had.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that? All right, the next thing is district administrative guidelines, discussion and update on the district administrative guidelines. I just wanna first start that we do have a policy on this, so I'll read the policy, or you can look it up. It's policy 1230.01, development of administrative guidelines. And it says the Board of Education delegates the district administrator the function of designing and implementing the guidelines, required actions, and detailed arrangements under the district in which the district will operate. These administrative guidelines shall not be inconsistent with the policies adopted by the board. The board itself will formulate and adopt administrative guidelines and rules only when required by law and when the district administrator recommends board adoption. The district administrator may also issue such administrative and student handbooks as he or she may consider necessary for the effective administration of the schools and distribute them to employees and students and to their parents. As long as the provisions of these administrative guidelines and handbooks are not consistent with board policies or with federal state law, they will be considered to be an extension of the policy manual and binding upon all employees and students. The district administrator shall maintain a current organizational chart to which immediate reference can be made by the board or the employee of the board. So I wanted to bring that policy up, and I know we had talked about administration guidelines and developing those when we looked at the Neola policies. And I think what I was just looking for, Andy, is your thoughts or any updates on the development of administrative guidelines. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
When you brought it up to me last week, we haven't purchased them from Neola at this time. We currently have administrative guidelines that we can use that are in place that work for us. So I don't know if I request purchasing them from Neola at this time. But
Yeah.
also under policy 1210, board district administrative relationship, the district administrator as the chief administrative officer of the district is the primary professional advisor of the board. She or he is responsible for the development, supervision, and operation of the school program facilities, including the development of administrative guidelines consistent with the policy you control, 30.01.
Right.
So, yes.
So I was gonna read that policy next when we get on the policy review 1210. Going back to the policy 1210, it says the board believes that in general it is the primary duty of the board to establish policies and that of the district administrator to administer such policies. And it references the development of the administrative guidelines consistent with the policy 1230.01, which I just read. So I'm just looking for your thoughts. Do you feel that we should be developing administrative guidelines, even though we have current ones? I think we have 24 you mentioned that are current.
Yep.
Current old ones? Or does any board member feel that it's necessary to have these, or just go with the old ones?
Well, remember
Jeff?
what Tim talked to you about. Tim said that policies are what you guys adopt, and guidelines are what the superintendent.
Yeah, yeah,
That's his deal.
yeah.
So,
Jeff?
So the ones that we have right now are referencing our policy. Administrative guidelines, essentially, from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Scott had a lot of input in this during our last discussion when we approved our policies. And they're just, for the record, this is, I think, important that we have these. The policies, once we changed our book of policies, the administrative guidelines referred to old policies. Some of those policies have changed, some of them don't exist anymore, and then we have additional policies. And what my understanding is that the administrator, the superintendent, takes our current policies, translates them, writes them into administrative guidelines, and then that's how the schools run. That's his marching orders to the team. That is my understanding. Am I incorrect with that?
Well, I guess what are you asking then? You don't need an administrative guideline when you have a policy, just to have a guideline. You're not gonna have a guideline for every policy.
Well, no, I understand that, obviously, but what I'm saying is you take all the policies, and then you write administrative guidelines based off of those policies, the same way it was done here previously. And I've seen the Neola policy guidelines for different school districts, and it's pretty, you know, cut and paste type of stuff. It just says this is the way the school's gonna run. It's your
Right.
interpretation of
Buy that?
how we're gonna run. No, I don't think we should buy it, I think we
Right.
should create it. That's
Right,
right.
well, we're gonna create that, but that's gonna take time. That's why a lot of people buy it. Right?
So how much time, Andy, do you think it would take for you to create them?
First I'd have to look at what their template is and what policies we have and how many guidelines we have for them. I don't know what you're looking for with the guidelines. What is it that we're not doing currently?
We don't have active,
Yeah, and some of these policies, it'll reference the administrative guidelines and some of these policies that I read, and we don't have the policies for that. I mean, we could, as a board, we can look and find out what they are, but I mean, when I read through it,
Right.
this was one of my first questions I asked when we covered the Neola policies in March, is what are the administrative guidelines and where do we refer that to? And I do recall that it would cost like $16,000, so I don't wanna pay for them. But you made a comment that you would work on them over the summer and get them to us, so that we could reference that guideline. And so I'm just trying to figure out, where are we at and what should we do with that,
I
you
would
know?
say right now, we don't have all those guidelines. If you're looking for
Okay,
all of them that would meet what we have to do with NOLA. I
okay,
remember us talking back in November in this room when we did the bylaws. Yes, we weren't going to do the administrative guidelines.
okay, I wasn't, yep,
Because
I
we
remember
weren't going to
that.
get it.
right.
Now, do we have some administrative guidelines? Yes.
Okay,
Only the ones we need to run that would make sense for whatever we're having an issue.
okay,
A guideline isn't just to have a guideline. There's something that wasn't being run right or done right that you put in a guideline or a procedure for. Not every policy needs a procedure for it. You read the policy and do what the policy says.
so why does it reference then to see the guideline in the policy? Like, if I go through some of these, it says see the guideline,
I don't know where.
yeah,
I'm missing it.
I apologize, I don't have one here, but if I were to cover
And you
one.
have 1230, if we ever went to it, development of administrative guidelines. But,
That's, I'm sorry for
it's, I guess my question is, I don't know what you feel we're not doing as a district right now, as an administration, that you feel the guidelines would give us so much guidance on. I guess
That's a
what
good
I'm asking.
question, no, that's a good question. So for me, it would be, when I read these policies, it says to look at an administrative guideline, not all of them. But when I read them and I come across that, I can write that down and share that with you. The second would be, as a board, shouldn't we prioritize and see which district administrative guidelines we should have if we don't have them? For maybe the current policies that we have been talking about lately, to see, you know what I mean, or things that are really apparent that we need to look at now? Or do we plan this out where we create district administrator policies over like the next 2 years, 2 or 3 years, and, you know, like you said, prioritize the ones we wanna work on first? So that, if you're not
Okay,
doing it
so
all,
you're
yeah, I
not-
got a couple questions there,
Yeah,
so,
policies and guidelines, so you intermingle them there.
sorry.
So I wrote down policies, so you wanna go on, you said like a 2-year time to look at policies, right?
I'm not sure if I'm saying this right.
Our policies are done, so
The
our
policies are done,
guidelines are
yeah.
still, the guidelines are not put in place, but per policy 0132.2, we give administrative, the delegation to the district administrator to then put the guidelines in place. So we have guidelines in place. Granted, from what I'm hearing, there's probably a mixed bag of updating needed and
Yeah,
fine
we
tuning.
can look at updating those, but yes, you're right.
But it's also not the board's responsibility to make those.
Correct.
Correct.
So, I'm sorry, let me jump in here. So,
Okay.
we had this discussion in March, and the question is, once, at that point, the administrative guidelines refer to old policies. And again, those policies no longer exist or have changed, and there's a history behind those, just like you were alluding to. Like, if there's something happening, you put a policy in place, or a district guideline you put in place, and there you have it. So I think that would be a great place to start, is to take the existing administrative guidelines and then update them with current policies. So that would be the first thing. But we discussed this, and we thought that August would be a time when we'd be able to present these. And again, we
I
talked
don't
about.
remember that being said at all.
Yeah, I got it straight from my notes in March.
And you made comment, you'd work on them over the summer in March.
Yeah.
So that's why I have it on the agenda, just to follow.
But
That's fine.
Andy,
That's fine.
it's
okay.
fine,
Yep,
it's fine, we
that's
just wanna work and get these done, right? And so what my position is, and I think as a board, is that there's liability involved in this too, because absent an administrative guideline, you know, people can interpret policies a lot of different ways, right? And an administrative guideline clears it up for the team, and it's not, what we do is create policy. What the superintendent does is he runs the day-to-day, and he creates the administrative guidelines to follow the policies we have in place. And so that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for updating those updating those administrative guidelines. You might find some new ones that you want in there, some that are just dated, that are bad, but that's what I think we should have as a school district. I think we should just.
And I wanted to see what one looks like, honestly, because I know we have old
Well, I
ones.
showed you those in my office. Those weren't, all you weren't.
No, I went, yeah. So I mean, I just wanna see what they are and how it is aligned. And I was just trying to see if I could read a policy here to see, and I don't think there's a lot of them in here, Andy, that say.
Yeah, I don't
And
know
maybe-
which ones there were.
Neola can do a search on our current policies and say, can you
Yeah.
do a search on administrative guideline and pull up which policies state that? And then
Reference
we could go from there and see really how many we have that would be needed.
You could do that if the old policies were put in the retired section, because the search function in board docs would allow you to do that. You could reference the
Oh,
keywords,
really?
and then it would pull them all up and match them. And it would make it a lot
Oh,
easier
okay.
for everyone to do. It has a meta search in there, but that would include, you know, updating the old policies into the retired policy section of board docs. I mean, it could make quick work of it.
And then my only other question, Andy, is are you comfortable with this policy, where it says development administrative guidelines as well as the board? Would they want, anybody want any changes or things added to this?
Which one are you talking about?
The 123001. If this is something
Well,
that,
this is not an agenda, so you can't be,
yeah, well, I'm sorry, yeah, it is district administrative guidelines, so I referenced the policy. I'm sorry, I don't have the policy number on the agenda, but I do have the discussion and I'm referencing it now. So if I can't reference it, I can put it on the agenda later.
yeah. we're
But
gonna
that's
have
what
to
I just
do.
read. All right,
Yeah, all it says is that you adopt administrative guidelines and rules only when required by law, and the
Yeah.
district administrator recommends board adoption.
yeah, so I guess I'm saying, are you okay with that? And so then,
Well, yeah, that's,
Okay.
yeah, you have a policy.
all right, good. Okay, so is that something,
I will
can
go
check
through
in.
some of those things and get back to you on that.
okay. Thank you. All right, the next thing is policy review. Policy 1210, board district administrator relationship. So I have this policy out as well, everybody can look it up, it's policy 1210. And just a couple things I just highlighted so that we're all on the same page, because I know we're new, some of us are new. I think the best way to do this, Carla had told me, when you do policy, when you're working on something, it's best to cover it at the time so you can connect, make a connection and attach to it versus trying to remember all these at the same time. And I think that's been beneficial for me. So, a couple of things I just want to read. The board believes that in general that it is the primary duty of the board to establish policies and that are of the district. administrator to administer such policies. Policies should not be originated or changed without the input and recommendation of the district administrator. The district administrator should be given the latitude to determine the best method of implementing the policies on the board. And the second paragraph indicates the district administrator is the chief administrative officer of the district, primary professional advisor to the board. He or she is responsible for the development, supervision, and operation of the school program and facilities, including the development of the administrative guidelines consistent with what I just read earlier, 1230:01. The district administrator and those administrators directed by the district administrator shall attend all board meetings when feasible. Administrative participation shall be professional, counsel, guidance, and recommendation only as distinct from deliberation, debate, and voting of board members. In the interest of promoting and maintaining a healthy and productive work environment, the district administrator shall report to the board president with any information regarding policies 3362, 4362, 0144 on behavior and conduct. The board is responsible for determining the success of the district administrator and meeting the goals established by the board through annual evaluation of the district administrator's performance. One question I have for the board is everybody good with this policy? Do they feel there's any changes? The second question I have is, do the administrators feel like they need to attend every board meeting? Are they comfortable, or should it be board meeting and workshop? Because I think what this phrase tells me is it's just the board meetings.
No, you should attend all board meetings. This is a board meeting.
Okay,
That is
alright.
a board meeting.
All right, thank you. I just looking for clarification. And so, are the administrators okay with attending these meetings? Point of reference. Okay.
I'll put it on the spot.
Not putting you on the spot. Sorry.
I didn't know they were optional.
Okay. And so with that, I just wanted to bring us up to speed so we're all on the same page, that we understand that the board drives the policy, and the district administrator will help recommend or advise the board on policies.
Well, I
Right.
got a question I'd like to read.
Sure, Andy.
When I read that first statement,
Yeah.
first paragraph, the board believes that, in general, it is the primary duty of the board to establish policies, that of the district administrator to administer such policies. Policies should not be originated or changed without the input or recommendation of the district administrator. The district administrator should be given the latitude to determine the best method of implementing the policies of the board. So that's what I questioned you on when we brought these rejected policies to the board. That's why I asked to put this policy on, to say, I didn't originate or bring any of these changes forward.
As recommended, yeah. But I think what we were taught from WSAB and from Lee Pritzel is that the board is responsible for initiating or creating the policy, but we would have to look to you for recommendation and advice as well. And that's what I read here. And that we give you the latitude to determine the best implementation.
Well, when I read those, Angela, it says
Yeah.
policy should not be originated or changed without the input or recommendation of the district administrator.
I'm
Pretty
with
clear.
you on that, yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
so I hear this policy and I understand what it means. Implementation latitude doesn't mean that the district administrator can reject or refuse or accept a new board policy, right? It means that the district administrator has the freedom to determine the best method for implementing the policy that's set by the board. You can provide input and recommendations as the board brings this up. It's statutory, this is straight from state statutes. The board sets the policy, the board creates the policy at the local level. But you have the influence over us in point of references and how you want to guide us and how these policies should be written. And then in the administrative guidelines, I hate to bring this back up again, but how these policies are carried out is part of the administrative guidelines. So these tie together. So if there's a policy that we write or that's created, yeah, we need to come to you and get your advice. This is very clear what this says. And it's our primary duty is to establish policies. That is what we are statutorily obligated
Right,
to do.
but this says policy should not be originated or changed without the input or recommendation from him. This is the same way we did with Carla. She brought the policies to us, we went through them, and that's exactly what I get out of this first paragraph as well.
Well, not necessarily, because I had a policy on energy consumption, remember that? I
Mhm.
created that myself and handed that to her, and she adopted. Plus, when we went through all the policy changes, just before she left, she had sent them to me and said, Angela, go through these and tell me what you like and don't like. And what she did is she looked at all of them and she didn't take everything I suggested, but she did take a majority. So that was kind of like a working relation
Yep.
type thing, right?
But she didn't have to either, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So, but it's because we have different board dynamics and new board members, and that we have new policies from Neola, and I'm having requests from board members to look at policies. I mean, should we change this policy then to read differently where it says policy should not be originated or changed, and maybe soften that a little bit to say policy should be brought forward or looked at as a board to review before, originating or changing?
but here's my thing, we
Okay.
just adopted these in March or April.
Yep.
Why are we going through them again, some of the rejected ones? Why, like when Carla did it, and I hate to always go back to her, but when she did it, it was like a 2-year, and then you'd review it. Unless something came up in that
Yeah,
young
and that's
time frame.
Yes, and that's what we're doing, right, same thing, Tiffany, we wanna use that same method, because the policies that are on here, I believe, like fiscal planning, facility and maintenance has to do with some of the things that are taking place right now, which we'll talk to in a second, okay? But, so, like she said, every 3 to 5 years, we would review policies after they're put in place, to see if they're,
Mhm.
so there was a